The 100 Years' War ravaged Europe, birthing the Free Companies. These mercenaries, led by the Black Prince, Edward of Woodstock, entered Castile's civil war. Their involvement shaped the destiny of King Peter, earning him the epithet Peter the Cruel. The year was 1366. The arid plains of Spain were torn by internal strife. Henry of Trastamara rose against his half-brother King Peter. The Free Company's swords became a potent weapon in this power struggle. Pedro I ascended the Castilian throne in 1350, a young king inheriting a kingdom already fractured by internal divisions and external threats. His reign began with promise, marked by efforts to centralize royal authority and curb the power of the nobility. However, Pedro's methods were often ruthless, his justice swift and merciless. He earned a reputation for cruelty, his enemies accusing him of tyranny and bloodshed. One by one, Pedro eliminated his rivals, consolidating his grip on power but also sowing the seeds of discontent. He was betrothed to Joan, the daughter of King Edward III of England, but she died of the Black Plague on her way to Castile. According to accounts, he secretly married Maria de Padilla, who became his lasting mistress. A short while later, Pedro's mother coerced him into marrying the French noblewoman Blanche of Bourbon, but he immediately deserted her because he found that she had slept with his half-brother, who had been charged with protecting her virtue. Blanche was imprisoned and later murdered. There were various rumors about who was responsible, although she could have died from the plague. Either way, she became a martyr for Pedro's opponents, fueling the flames of rebellion. The king's actions, driven by a lust for power and a ruthless pragmatism, alienated powerful factions within Castile, pushing the kingdom closer to the brink of civil war. The Free Companies, forged in the crucible of the 100 Years' War, were a formidable force. Composed of seasoned veterans from across Europe, they were masters of war, their skills honed in countless battles and sieges. They fought not for king or country, but for plunder and glory, their loyalty fleeting, their swords at the disposal of the highest bidder. Among their ranks rose legendary figures like Bertrand du Guesclin, the Eagle of Brittany, a cunning tactician and a fierce warrior who would later become Constable of France. Another prominent leader was Sir Hugh de Calverley, an English knight renowned for his military prowess. These men, driven by ambition and the promise of riches, would play pivotal roles in the Castilian conflict. Their companies tipped the balance of power. They were a force of nature, as unpredictable and destructive as a storm, and their arrival in Castile would have far-reaching consequences. Henry of Trastamara, Pedro's illegitimate half-brother, emerged as the focal point of opposition to the king's rule. Ambitious and ruthless in his own right, Henry capitalized on the growing discontent with Pedro's reign, gathering around him a coalition of disaffected nobles and foreign powers eager to see a change in Castile. Henry found a powerful ally in Charles V of France. Eager to weaken England's influence in the region, Charles saw in Henry a valuable pawn. He provided him with troops and resources, recognizing that a friendly Castile would be a significant asset in his ongoing struggle against the English. With French support and the backing of rebellious Castilian lords, Henry launched his bid for the throne, plunging the kingdom into a bloody civil war. The conflict between Pedro and Henry reached its climax in 1367 at the Battle of Nájera. This brutal clash, fought near the Ebro River, pitted brother against brother, each supported by a formidable army bolstered by the presence of the Free Companies. Pedro's forces were backed by the Black Prince and his English veterans. They faced off against Henry's army, which was reinforced by French troops under the command of Bertrand du Guesclin. The battle raged for hours, a chaotic melee of steel and fury. The Black Prince, a brilliant tactician, outmaneuvered his opponents, leading his English knights to a decisive victory. Henry's forces were routed, his French allies scattered. Pedro, his throne secured, had triumphed, but his victory came at a heavy price. The Black Prince, deeply in debt and disillusioned by the experience, withdrew his support, leaving Pedro to face the consequences of the battle alone. The conflict in Castile was not merely a dynastic struggle. It became entangled in the complex web of religious politics that characterized 14th century Europe. The Avignon papacy, under the influence of the French crown, threw its support behind Henry of Trastamara, declaring Pedro a tyrant and legitimizing his claim to the throne. Papal bulls urged the faithful to rise against Pedro, transforming the conflict into a holy war. This religious dimension added a layer of complexity to the conflict, galvanizing support for Henry while further isolating Pedro. The Church's involvement highlights the intertwined nature of secular and religious authority in medieval Europe. It also demonstrated the potent force of religious justifications in legitimizing claims to power and mobilizing support for one side in a conflict. Despite his victory at Nígera, Pedro's position remained precarious. His apparent cruelty and his reliance on foreign mercenaries had alienated many within Castile, and Henry of Trastamara, though defeated, was far from finished. With renewed French support, he launched a fresh invasion. Betrayed by his own people and abandoned by his former allies, Pedro was captured by Henry's forces after a desperate stand at the castle of Montiel. In a final act of treachery, Pedro was lured into the tent of Henry under the promise of safe passage. There, unarmed and outnumbered, he met his end at the hands of his half-brother. The reign of Peter the Cruel had come to a bloody end. But was he really cruel? Or was that really just a label given him by his enemies? Some claimed that the name was not fitting, that Peter was actually a king who ruled with justice. Over time, Peter also came to be known as Peter the Just. These recalled that Peter only killed those who broke the law or would not respect the rights of others. They claimed that he was respected by many of his subjects. Victorious at last, Henry ascended the Castilian throne as Henry II. His reign marked the beginning of the Trastamara dynasty, which would rule Castile for the next century. However, the kingdom he inherited was scarred by years of civil war, its treasury depleted, its social fabric torn apart. The free companies, their services no longer required, proved a lingering menace. Unpaid and restless, they pillaged the countryside, adding to the devastation. Henry II faced the daunting task of rebuilding his shattered kingdom, reconciling feuding factions, and restoring order after years of chaos. Pedro remains a controversial figure in history. Was he a ruthless tyrant, as his enemies claimed, or a strong ruler who took harsh measures to preserve his kingdom? Cruel or just, whatever the case, Peter's reign provides examples of the complexity presented by figures in history. Pedro's reign was undoubtedly marked by violence and cruelty, but he also faced extraordinary challenges, inheriting a kingdom riven by internal divisions and threatened by external enemies. The free companies, those mercenary bands who played such a pivotal role in his downfall, left a significant mark on 14th century Europe. They were a symptom of a turbulent age, a product of endemic warfare and the decline of feudal loyalties. Their presence in Castile, while decisive in the short term, ultimately contributed to the instability and destruction that plagued the kingdom. The story of Peter of Castile and the Free Companies serves as a stark reminder of the human capacity for both good and evil, and of the enduring power of ambition, betrayal, and the allure of the sword in shaping the course of history. Thank you for watching. If you found this video beneficial, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to Trot Historia to continue learning from the annals of history.